Priya Nair gave one answer on Family Feud that had nothing to do with the survey question on the board, and everything to do with what her mother had sold to get her there. When Steve Harvey heard it, he placed his cue cards face down on the podium, pressed his hand over his chest, and stood completely still for 11 seconds in front of a studio audience of 300 people. Then he turned away from the cameras. The crew members who had been working that stage for 9 years said they had never seen him do that before. Priya's answer was 6 words. 6 words that explained 22 years of a family's life in a way that no sum, no diploma, no professional credential ever could. The Nair family arrived at the Family Feud studio in Atlanta on a Friday morning in February. They were 5. Priya, 31, a software engineer at a healthcare company in New Jersey. Her mother Meena, 58. Her father Rajan, 62. Her younger brother Vikram, 26. And her cousin Anita, 29, who had driven 4 hours from Baltimore because Meena had called and said the family needed 5 players and Anita was family. They were an organized family. The kind that coordinates matching colors without calling it a uniform, that arrives early and checks in quietly and waits without fidgeting. Meena had been cooking for 3 days before they left New Jersey, preparing portions of every dish Priya had requested since childhood, wrapped in foil and packed in a cooler for the drive south, because Meena did not trust that any restaurant on the highway would understand what proper food was supposed to taste like. Steve Harvey took one look at them and said they were the most coordinated family he had seen all month. Meena said, in a voice that was precise and formal and warm all at once, "We prepared." The audience laughed. Steve said, "I can see that." Nobody in that studio knew what preparing had actually meant for this family. Priya Nair's parents had come to the United States from Kerala, India, in 1995 with 4 suitcases, $800, a working knowledge of English from Rajan's engineering degree, and a belief so fundamental it was not discussed because it did not need to be, that their children's education was the primary project of their lives in America, and that every other comfort was negotiable. Rajan found work as a draftsman at a construction firm in New Jersey. The pay was enough to cover a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood where Meena didn't like to walk alone after dark, but where the public school system was considered acceptable. Meena took English composition courses at a community college at night, and during the day kept the apartment with an order that compensated for everything outside it that was difficult to control. She found Indian grocery stores. She found a temple. She found 2 other Keralite families in the surrounding neighborhoods and built a small world of familiar language and food and prayer inside a larger world that still felt foreign and loud and expensive. Priya was born the year they arrived. She learned to read in both English and Malayalam simultaneously. She won her school's spelling bee in 3rd grade, using a word she had learned from one of her mother's cookbooks. By the time she was 12, she was the one translating documents for her parents at the bank, at the doctor's office, at the school administrative office when the forms arrived in dense, bureaucratic English. She carried this work without naming it work. It was simply what she did. When Priya was 16, Rajan's company downsized. He was let go in a round of layoffs that kept the American-born engineers and released the H-1B visa holders first. He found contract work within 3 months, but the gap was 4 months long, and in those 4 months, the family stopped buying anything that wasn't food. They stopped the cable subscription. They turned the heat down to 61 degrees in winter and wore extra sweaters. Meena went back to work at a dry cleaning business that required her to stand for 9 hours a day, and she came home every evening with her feet swollen and her hands smelling of chemicals, and she never said a word about either of those things. But that wasn't even the thing that would stop the show. When Priya was accepted to Rutgers University on a partial merit scholarship, The financial aid package still left a gap of $14,000 per year. Rajan calculated. He looked at his savings. He looked at his contract work income, which varied month to month. He looked at the gap. Meena said nothing for 2 days. On the 3rd day, she went to the safe deposit box at their bank and removed a set of gold jewelry, a necklace, 2 bangles, and a pair of earrings that had been given to her by her mother on her wedding day. They were not worth a great deal by American standards. They were worth everything by the standard that actually mattered. She sold them at a jeweler in Edison, New Jersey, for $6,200. She put the money toward Priya's tuition without telling Priya it was her grandmother's jewelry until 2 years later, when it slipped out during a phone call. Priya did not speak for the rest of that phone call. She finished her degree in 3 years and 8 months. She got a job before graduation. She paid her parents back, all of it, with an amount added on top that her mother refused to count and that Rajan pretended not to notice. She tried to give her mother money for new jewelry. Meena refused. She said the original jewelry had done what it was meant to do. On the Family Feud stage, Steve Harvey asked the question, "Name something a mother gives up for her children." The survey answers on the board included sleep, time, career, money. Priya pressed the buzzer. Steve pointed to her. "Priya, your answer?" Priya said her mother's jewelry. "To pay my tuition." 6 seconds of absolute silence. Steve Harvey's smile disappeared. He looked at Priya. He looked at Meena. He looked at the cards in his hand. He placed them face down on the podium slowly, with both hands, the way you set something down that you want to be careful with. The studio fell completely silent. Not the usual game show pause. A different kind of silence entirely. 300 people stopped breathing at the same moment. Steve took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Then he did something no host had done in the 42-year history of this show. He walked off the stage entirely and stood with his back to the audience for 4 seconds. When he turned around, his eyes were red at the corners. He walked to Meena. He didn't say anything for a moment. He just looked at her. Meena looked back at him, straight, calm, the way she always held herself, with the particular dignity of a woman who has never expected anyone to notice what she carries. Steve said, in a voice that was quiet and low and not the host voice at all, "Mrs. Nair, you sold your mother's jewelry." Meena said, "It was the right thing." Steve said, "I know. That's the part that gets me." He turned to the audience. He turned to the cameras. He said, "Let me tell you something about this woman. She came to this country with $800. She stood for 9 hours a day at a dry cleaner with swollen feet and said nothing. She sold jewelry her own mother gave her on her wedding day. And she did all of that. She did all of it. And she never once called it sacrifice. She called it the right thing." His voice cracked once, and he let it crack. "I was sleeping in my car in 1985, Steve said, showering in gas station bathrooms. I had nobody selling anything for me. I had to find my own way. And I know what it feels like to need someone to see you and have no one looking. Mrs. Nair, I'm looking. We're all looking." He pulled out his phone, no producer approval, no network sign-off, and called his personal business manager on speaker. He told him to set up a $30,000 educational endowment in the name of Meena Nair at the temple in New Jersey, where the Nair family had worshipped since 1996, designated to fund full college scholarships for immigrant children in the surrounding community. He named it the Meena Nair Merit Fund. He said the motto would be 3 words, taken from Meena's own sentence, "The right thing." But Steve wasn't done. He told Priya that she would receive a technology mentorship grant through his foundation, connecting her with senior leadership in the healthcare technology space where she worked. He told Vikram that any graduate school application he submitted in the next 3 years could request a letter of endorsement directly from Steve Harvey's office. And then he turned to the competing family, the Jackson family from Atlanta, and announced that both families would walk away with the full cash prize. The Jacksons' eldest daughter crossed the stage and hugged Priya without being asked. She said, loud enough for the microphones to catch it, "Your mom is everything." When the episode aired 9 weeks later, it was watched by over 140 million people in the first week. The clip trended in 37 countries. In India, the story ran on 17 national news channels. In Kerala, the village where Meena was born ran an article with her photograph. An elderly woman in that village, who had known Meena's mother, saw it and wept. 3 months after the taping, the Nair Merit Fund awarded its first scholarship to a 19-year-old named Kirthana, whose parents had emigrated from Tamil Nadu. At the award ceremony, Kirthana asked Meena if she could see the jewelry. Meena smiled and said the jewelry wasn't there anymore. Then she said, "But look at you." There it is. A year after the taping, Steve Harvey mentioned the Nair family in a commencement address at Howard University. He used Meena's sentence, "It was the right thing," as the centerpiece of his entire speech. He said it was the most accurate definition of parental love he had ever heard in his life. Today, the Meena Nair Merit Fund has awarded 37 scholarships across New Jersey and New York. One of Priya's colleagues at her healthcare company made an anonymous donation that doubled the endowment's initial size. Priya herself contributes annually, in an amount she does not disclose. Meena still cooks for 3 days before any family trip. She still packs the cooler. She still does not trust any restaurant on the highway to understand what proper food is supposed to taste like. Some things do not change. Some things are not meant to. There is a kind of sacrifice so ordinary that it doesn't look like sacrifice. It looks like a Tuesday, a phone call, a box opened at a jeweler's counter, a decision made quietly and not revisited. It looks like a woman who gave her mother's wedding gift to a future that she would never see for herself, only through her daughter. Meena Nair called it the right thing. Steve Harvey called it the most moving moment in 42 years of television. The woman from Kerala called it what it was: love, doing its daily work, without an audience and without a name. If this incredible story of sacrifice and love moved your heart, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that the quiet sacrifices, the ones made without announcement and without applause, are often the ones that change everything. Have you ever watched a parent give everything for a child's dream? Let us know in the comments and ring that notification bell for more stories that remind us what family truly means.